Japan is the country that hands you a hot can of coffee from a machine on an empty mountain road at midnight. It is bullet trains that arrive to the second, convenience stores glowing on every corner, strangers who will walk 3 blocks out of their way just to show you the right exit. It is one of the most open, polite, welcoming places a traveler will ever set foot in. But there is another Japan, a Japan with walls, with gates topped in metal spikes, with signs that do not warn you about the place ahead, they warn the place about you. These are 10 locations across the country that you are forbidden to enter, and the reasons run from the sacred to the radioactive to the unspeakably violent. Some have turned people away for over 1,000 years. One of them was sealed within our own lifetime. We are starting with the gentlest, and we are counting down to the one that should frighten you the most. So stay with me, because the closer we get to number 1, the harder it becomes to believe these places exist in a modern country at all. Place 10, Itsukushima, the island where you are not allowed to be born and not allowed to die. You have almost certainly seen it, even if you have never heard its name. Itsukushima, known to most people as Miyajima, sits in the bay just outside Hiroshima, and its great vermilion gate appears to float on the water at high tide. It is one of the most photographed objects in all of Japan. Millions come every year. The tame deer wander the streets. It looks, by every measure, like a place that wants you there. And yet this is an island governed by one of the oldest and strictest rules in the Shinto faith. The concept is called kegare, which roughly means ritual impurity, the spiritual pollution that comes from blood and from death. To protect the purity of the shrine, the island has been kept, as much as humanly possible, free of both. Since 1878, no births and no deaths have been permitted on Miyajima. Burials are forbidden outright. There is no cemetery anywhere on it. Here is what that means in practice, and it is stranger than it sounds. To this day, when a woman on the island nears the end of her pregnancy, she is expected to cross the water to the mainland to give birth. The terminally ill and the very elderly whose time is clearly approaching are quietly moved off the island as well. And the fear of blood here is not gentle or symbolic. After a battle was fought on the island in the 1500s, the victors did not simply bury the dead. They carried every last body off the island, then went back and scrubbed the killing ground itself, lifting out the blood-soaked soil and hauling it away, scouring the stones, because they believed the very earth had been poisoned by what had soaked into it. So the 2 most human events there, the first breath and the last, are both of them things you are not allowed to do. You can visit. You simply cannot begin or end your life there. Place 9. Mount Omine, the last mountain in Japan that still turns women away at the gate. Rise above the forests of Nara Prefecture and you reach Sanjogatake, the sacred peak of Mount Omine. For roughly 1,300 years, it has been a center of Shugendo, an ascetic mountain religion whose practitioners seek enlightenment through brutal physical trials on the bare rock. One of those trials involves being held by the ankles and dangled headfirst over a sheer cliff edge, hundreds of feet of empty air below, until you confess your sins to the mountain. The site is so significant, it forms part of a World Heritage listing. It is also the last place of its kind. Across Japan, dozens of sacred mountains once banned women from their slopes under a rule called Nyonin Kekai, which translates almost literally to the boundary women may not cross. One by one, over the last century and a half, those bans fell away. Mount Omine never lifted its own. It is the only major mountain in the entire country that still enforces it. At the trailhead to the peak stands a stone pillar more than 10 feet tall, carved with the message that from this point onward, the area is closed to women. Beside it, an 11-foot wooden gate, topped with rows of metal spikes, bears a sign that reads, "No woman admitted." And no, This is not a relic behind glass in a museum. We are talking about a sign, actively maintained, posted today in the 21st century. The government actually outlawed these gender bans back in 1872 during the Meiji era. Then, decades later, the old traditions were allowed to return, and this one came back and never left. The ban now carries no legal penalty, and it has been deliberately crossed in protest more than once, with no punishment beyond a request from the temple to show more respect. But the temple still posts the gate, still maintains the pillar, still draws the line. 13 centuries on, that line has not moved a single inch. Place 8. The inner sanctum of Ise Grand Shrine. The building you are forbidden to enter, forbidden to photograph, and forbidden to even fully see. Ise, in Maya Prefecture, is the holiest site in the entire Shinto religion. Its inner shrine, the Naiku, is dedicated to Amaterasu, the sun goddess, who in tradition is the direct ancestor of the Japanese imperial line itself. People travel from every corner of the country to worship here, but what they are actually allowed to see is almost nothing. The true sanctuary, the Hondan, sits hidden behind 4 separate rows of tall wooden fences. Only 2 kinds of people in the entire world may pass beyond them: members of the imperial family and the most senior priests of the shrine. That is the complete list. The chief priest or priestess of Ise must, by rule, be a blood relation of the imperial house. Photography of the main sanctuary is forbidden, so even the rare images that escape are partial, taken from a distance, with fences always in the frame. Inside, by tradition, is the sacred mirror, one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, an object the overwhelming majority of citizens will never lay eyes on. And here is the detail that makes Ise genuinely unlike anywhere else on Earth. Every 20 years, in a ritual stretching back over 1,000 years, the entire shrine is torn down and rebuilt, perfectly identical, on an empty plot of land directly beside it. The old structure simply vanishes. The sacred objects are carried across in secret, often in the dead of night, by torchlight, shielded from every onlooker. So the building itself is never old and never permanent, and almost no living person has ever truly seen what waits at its heart. It is forbidden in the most complete sense of the word. You cannot enter it, you cannot picture it, and within 20 years, the very building you were forbidden from will no longer exist. Place 7. The Imperial Tombs. 188 sealed graves the government will not allow anyone to open. Travel to the city of Sakai, near Osaka, and you can stand at the edge of Daisen Kofun, one of the largest tombs ever built by human hands. Constructed in the mid-5th century, the keyhole-shaped mound stretches roughly 1,600 feet long, about 486 meters, with a perimeter close to 1 3/4 miles, around 2.8 kilometers, ringed by water-filled moats. By length, it is the largest tomb in Japan and the 3rd largest in the world. Estimates suggest it took some 2,000 laborers around 16 years to raise it, hauling earth by hand, year after year. An unknown number of them are believed to have died in the building of it, their bodies folded into the same mound they were piling up for an emperor. It is believed to hold Emperor Nintoku, believed, because no one has ever been allowed inside to confirm it. This is the work of the Imperial Household Agency, the government body that manages the affairs of the imperial family. It controls 188 tombs scattered across the country, designating them as imperial graves, and it keeps them strictly, completely off limits. Not just to the public, to historians, to archaeologists, to the very people whose entire careers are built on opening the past. The official reasoning is religious and ceremonial. These are resting places, and the dead are not to be disturbed. But the silence has bred questions for over a century, because what lies inside these mounds could rewrite the earliest chapters of Japanese history, and possibly complicate the official story of where the imperial line truly came from. For generations, scholars were turned away at every single request. Only very recently was a small group of researchers permitted, under official escort, to walk the base of one tomb. the first such visit since the Second World War. They were not allowed to dig. They were not allowed inside. They walked the perimeter, took their notes, and then they left, and the door closed quietly behind them once again. Place 6. Okinoshima, the island that admits 200 men a year, 0 women ever, and forbids you to ever speak of what you saw. About 37 miles off the coast of Kyushu, roughly 60 kilometers out into the Genkai Sea, lies a single sacred island that is essentially one enormous shrine. Okinoshima was added to the World Heritage List in 2017, and the world's sudden attention only sharpened how strange its rules really are. No woman has ever been permitted to set foot on it. Not as a visitor, not as a researcher, not for any reason at all. Men are allowed, but barely. Up to 200 of them, on one single day a year, the 27th of May, for a festival honoring sailors lost at sea. Before any of them can step ashore, they must strip completely naked and bathe in the ocean to purify themselves. Then come the other rules. You may not take anything off the island, not a souvenir, not a stone, not a twig, not one single blade of grass. And the strangest rule of all, the one the islanders call Oiwazu-sama, you are forbidden from speaking of anything you see or hear there. Whatever happens on Okinoshima stays unspoken for the rest of your life. That silence is why the place has earned nicknames like the Island of Mystery and the Unspoken One, which means almost everything the outside world knows about the inside of Okinoshima comes from people who, strictly speaking, were never supposed to tell us a thing. And it matters even more because of what is physically there. Buried across the island are more than 80,000 ancient artifacts, comma-shaped beads, fragments of Persian glass, gold rings, and offerings left by envoys traveling between Japan and the Asian mainland between the 4th and the 9th centuries. They were laid down as gifts to the gods, and they have never been carried away. An entire treasury of the ancient world, sitting in the open, on an island where almost no human being is ever allowed to stand, and where the few who are cannot tell you a word about it. Place 5. Hashima. The most crowded place that ever existed, now collapsing into the sea faster than anyone can record it. Off the coast of Nagasaki sits a silhouette so distinctive it earned a nickname, Gunkanjima, meaning Battleship Island, because from the water its wall of crumbling apartment blocks looks exactly like a warship riding low in the waves. The undersea coal mines here opened in 1887, and the operator, Mitsubishi, packed workers and their families onto a rock barely 15 acres in size, about 6.3 hectares. At its peak in 1959, more than 5,200 people lived there. That gave Hashima the highest population density ever recorded anywhere on Earth, roughly 7 times denser than central Paris. And that density was not the worst of it. The work itself happened far below the sea floor, in tunnels where the heat climbed past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, around the high 30s degrees Celsius, and the air turned thick and wet and hard to breathe. Men crawled into spaces too low to stand, hacking at coal in the dark with the constant threat of gas, of flooding, of the roof simply coming down and burying them under the ocean. Many never came back up. The bodies of some were never recovered at all, left somewhere in the flooded black veins beneath the island. Then, in January 1974, Mitsubishi closed the mine. By the 20th of April, every living resident was gone. The island emptied in a matter of weeks. For decades, it was sealed off entirely. Today, you can technically visit, but the word visit is doing a great deal of work. Tourists are confined to a narrow strip of walkways along roughly 1/3 of the island's edge, kept at a distance behind barriers. You cannot enter the buildings. You cannot wander the streets where thousands once lived. The structures are too unstable, and getting close enough to touch them is forbidden because they are actively coming apart. If the silhouette looks familiar, it should. It was the model for the villain's dead city in the James Bond film Skyfall. And here is the part that should sit with you. The boats can only land on about 100 days a year, and every season that passes, more of the city falls into the ocean. The Hashima you would film today will not be the Hashima that exists 10 years from now. It is a place you are forbidden to enter, quietly erasing itself, and everyone buried beneath it, from the world. Place 4. The crater of Sakurajima. Cross this line, and the mountain can kill you in seconds. Up to this point, the walls in this list have been built by belief, by tradition, by the decisions of priests and government agencies. That changes now. Sakurajima, looming over the city of Kagoshima in southern Kyushu, is one of the most active volcanoes on Earth. It does not erupt rarely, as if it were a special event. It erupts as a matter of routine, sometimes hundreds of times in a single year, coughing columns of ash high into the sky over a city of 500,000 people. We know exactly what it is capable of because we have watched it do its worst. In 1914, the Taisho eruption became the most powerful in Japan in the entire 20th century. Imagine the ground itself splitting open and bleeding fire. It poured out around 3 billion tons of lava, rivers of molten rock glowing orange in the night, advancing slowly enough to watch and far too fast to outrun if you were old or sick, or simply standing in the wrong village. That lava swallowed homes whole and filled in an entire strait of the sea, roughly 1,300 feet wide and over 200 feet deep, around 400 meters by 70 meters, hissing and screaming as cold seawater met liquid stone. Anything caught in its path was not buried. It was cooked, then entombed in rock that is still there today. Ash rained down as far as the north of the main island of Honshu, and dozens of people died. So a hard rule is drawn around its summit. Everything within roughly 1.25 miles of the crater, 2 kilometers, is a permanently restricted no-entry zone. Every tourist facility on the entire volcano sits more than 2.5 kilometers back from the top. You can ride up to an observation point near the edge of the forbidden zone with a licensed guide, and look. You cannot go in. The danger is not abstract. The city living in the volcano's shadow deals with it daily. When the ash falls, residents raise umbrellas against it, the way other cities raise them against rain. School children wear hard hats on the walk to class, protection against chunks of falling volcanic rock that can crack a skull. This is a place where the line on the map is not about purity and not about history. It is simply the distance at which the mountain stops, being able to reach out and burn you alive. Place 3. Nishinoshima, the island that is still being born, and you are banned from landing on it. Far to the south of Tokyo, around 580 miles out, roughly 940 kilometers into the open Pacific, something genuinely rare happened in front of human eyes. In 2013, after 40 years of silence, an undersea volcano erupted and pushed a brand new island up out of the ocean, right beside the older Nishinoshima. It grew, and it kept growing. By the time the eruption settled, the island had swelled to roughly 11 times its former size. New land, still warm, lifted straight from the seafloor. Scientists watched the entire thing unfold from a safe distance, and a safe distance was the only kind permitted. To stand on that island during the eruption would have meant breathing air laced with sulfur and superheated gas, walking on a crust thin enough to break through into molten rock beneath, the soles of your boots melting before you understood your mistake. During the eruption, landing was strictly prohibited, and the no-entry zone drawn around the island was, at times, larger than the island itself. Even now that the volcano has gone quiet, you still cannot simply go ashore. Landing is forbidden except for a special, approved scientific purpose. The reason is the part that lingers. This is not only about the danger, it is about keeping the island untouched. Nishinoshima is a once-in-a-generation natural laboratory, a piece of fresh land where scientists can study exactly how life arrives somewhere it has never existed before, how the first seeds blow in on the wind, how the first birds land and what they carry, how an entire living world assembles itself from absolutely nothing. A single human footprint, a seed caught in the tread of a boot, would contaminate that experiment forever. So a brand new piece of the planet sits quarantined in the middle of the ocean, forbidden to almost everyone, precisely because no one has spoiled it yet. Place 2. Iwo Jima, an island of the dead, the living are not permitted to return to. Its name is known around the world for 5 weeks of fighting in 1945, some of the most savage combat of the entire Second World War. More than 20,000 men died on each side over a single scrap of volcanic rock barely 8 square miles across. But the number is the easy part. It is what those deaths actually looked like that the history books tend to skip. The Japanese defenders did not fight in the open. They were dug deep into a honeycomb of tunnels beneath the island, miles of them, and the only way to clear a tunnel was to go in after them or to burn them out. So the Americans brought flamethrowers, the backpack kind carried by men and the tank-mounted kind they nicknamed the Zippo. A jet of burning fuel would be fired into a cave mouth or a bunker slit, and everything inside would ignite at once. Men came apart in that fire. Skin blackened and split. Hair and uniforms went up in an instant, and the sound that came out of those holes in the rock was something the survivors carried for the rest of their lives. The smell carried too, drifting across the black sand on the wind, the unmistakable reek of burning hair and cooked flesh mixed with the rotten egg stench of sulfur that already hangs over the island. Because that is what the name Iwo Jima means. Sulfur Island. The ground itself steams. Men fought and burned and died on rock that was already hot to the touch, in air that already smelled faintly of the grave. And many of them were never burned and never shot. They were sealed in. When a tunnel could not be cleared, it was simply blown shut at both ends, trapping whoever was inside in total darkness to die slowly of their wounds, of thirst, of suffocation, scratching at collapsed rock that would never move. Thousands of those men are still down there right now, beneath the soil, never recovered. That is the real reason the island is closed. Today it is officially called Iwoto. It is Japanese territory, and almost no one is allowed to set foot on it. The civilians evacuated in 1944 were never permitted to move home. Only the self-defense forces are stationed there now. Former residents and their descendants are allowed back only rarely, and only to visit the graves of their ancestors before they are taken away again. Their requests to actually return and live there have been refused, in part because the ground itself is too dangerous. And when they say the island will not let them back, they mean it almost literally. Iwo Jima is volcanically alive. It is slowly rising, year after year, the whole island heaving upward, pushing the unburied dead a little closer to the surface, even as it seals them in deeper. It is a graveyard that will not hold still. On an island, the dead are allowed to keep, and the living are not. Place 1. The difficult-to-return zone of Fukushima. The towns where the clock stopped and where you still need written permission just to walk in. Every place so far has been forbidden by something you can name and point to. A god, an emperor, a volcano, a war. The last one on this list was sealed by something you cannot see at all, and that is exactly what makes it the most frightening of them. On the 11th of March, 2011, a massive earthquake and tsunami struck the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, and the meltdown that followed scattered radiation across the surrounding land. In the towns nearest the plant, places like Futaba and Okuma, everyone was ordered out. They left in a matter of hours, most of them expecting to come back within days. Many of them never came back at all. The area at the heart of the contamination was designated the difficult-to-return zone, and more than a decade later, parts of it remain exactly that, still sealed, still restricted, still off-limits. And understand what it is that keeps you out. Not a fire you can see, not a flow of lava you can run from, but an invisible poison settled into the soil and the dust and the leaves that does its killing silently and from the inside. Step in unprotected and breathe in the wrong particle and nothing happens. No pain, no smell, no warning. The damage is done quietly, deep in your cells, and it can wait years before it surfaces as something with a terrible name. That is the horror of this place. It looks completely normal. The danger is entirely in what you cannot feel. So access still requires written permission from the authorities, and even those allowed in to check on their old homes are generally forbidden from staying overnight. Crews have spent years and staggering sums of public money scrubbing the land district by district, with the full lifting of the orders in some towns still years away. And what waits inside is the most haunting image on this entire list. Calendars still hang on the walls, frozen in time on the day everyone fled in March 2011. Shops stand with goods still on the shelves and a checkout abandoned mid-shift. Homes sit with meals left to rot on the table, slippers by the door, a child's bicycle on its side in the yard. And through the silent streets, where no human being is allowed to live, wild boar move freely, fat and unafraid, having claimed the towns as their own. This is the newest forbidden place in Japan. Not ancient, not sacred, not legend. An ordinary modern town, full of ordinary modern lives, sealed inside our own lifetime by something with no shape, no color, and no sound at all. So, there it is. 10 places and 10 completely different kinds of walls. Think for a moment about how far apart the two ends of this list really are. At one end, an island near Hiroshima where, out of pure reverence, you are simply not allowed to be born or to die. At the other, towns in Fukushima where, out of pure fear, you are not allowed to stay. A country that will pour you a hot coffee from a roadside machine at midnight is also a country that will burn men out of the rock, seal an emperor's tomb against its own historians, and draw an invisible, radioactive line on a map that you cross at the risk of your life. Two faces, the one that Japan shows the world, and the one it keeps locked away for itself. If you made it all the way to the end, do me a favor and tap the like button. It takes about 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps more people find this hidden side of Japan. And tell me down in the comments, which of these 10 would you actually risk visiting, and which forbidden place did I leave out? There is far more of this Japan where that came from, the one behind the walls, and we are only just getting started.